come with me to visit some yarn store in Milan, Italy. This is my first time doing a yarn crawl in Milan, and I visited one of the most beautiful yarn shop, as well as some haberdasheries and also a magazine store. Okay, let's go and see them. I am in Milan attending my very first event and market, and since I have some free time, I decided to do a little bit of a yarn crawl. It's my first time exploring the yarn store in the city, so let's just see what they have to offer. The first shop I visited is Centro della Lana. It had some great reviews, and as soon as I stepped in, I was in awe, pure wow feeling about these walls of wool. You can take a little basket and enjoy some yarn shopping. Since I visited these stores in April, spring, most of the exhibit had cotton as well as linen and stuff like that. Be always mindful of reading the label correctly, because not everything is 100% cotton, and especially in Italy, most of the skeins have acrylic and polyester in them, so just be mindful. I really enjoyed seeing some samples made with the wool inside the shop, as it's not super common in shops in Italy, and I also liked very much to see samples made with different yarns as well as different kind of needles. I think I felt very comfortable inside this shop, and I also chatted a bit with the person behind the counter, and they asked me about my Archer bag, which was very cute of them, and I kind of fell in love with this yellow linen. But I didn't buy anything. I was just browsing and enjoying the good vibes and all the colors of this lovely shop. I'm a big tweed lover, and this was the first time I saw some lovely tweed inside a shop in Italy. Most of the branding here were Italian. Cardiff Cashmere is Italian. And they also had some like more luxurious kind of skeins, like this gorgeous mohair in a lovely rainbow color, so a lot to choose from. They also had some notion just a little bit behind the counter, so not very easy to spot, and they were holding classes for the winter. I truly enjoy that you can see all the different kind of yarns, so you can have a quick look at all the colors you prefer before choosing. For the next shop, we had to move on the other side of town. We used the car since we were there in that, but I highly advised using the metro or bus system, because it's so hard to find parking in the city center. The next shop I visited is Lanar, which is actually quite a historic institution, since they are a well-known wool manufacturer. And as soon as you enter the shop, you'll find a very nice selections of books. They were almost all in English, and well, I've never seen them in Italy, so I was super happy to flip through them. They had some samples on show, and there was a sign that they also sell the patterns for all these, which I think is truly amazing. I would really love to know if they have collaborations with designer, or maybe they have a designer in-house, but there were some lovely pieces in there. Some of their yarns were in cones, which is rocca in Italiano, and they, well, it just makes sense since they are an industrial production. They also had some wool that was sold by weight, as well as some more various colored cones and skeins on the other side of the shop. They had some samples on display, not very much, but a good quantity to get a gist of the skeins. All the notions there were inside cases, I don't know why, like precious items in a museum, as well as some project bags from Curoneco, which is a Spanish brand, if I'm correct. I loved this vintage spinner, and I would have really liked to see it in action. Maybe another visit. I saw there was a sign for classes, but it didn't say how many of them. And they also had lots of Knit Pro products, which is kind of well established in Italy. The rest of the shop was some more cones, as well as most of the skeins for their different and very wide range of yarns. They have truly a lot. I loved these colors, but it's a blend of wool and cotton, which I'm not very sure in which season should I use this, but very nice palette. And I loved to see these variegated yarns displayed in samples like this. I always feel it's difficult to know with a variegated skein how it's gonna be when it's worked, and this kind of sample that's cut so you can only see the way the color spreads, I think it works wonderfully. I visited the shop during, very close to the lunch break hour, so it was empty and very quiet, and I enjoyed my time there. That was super nice, and it was extremely wholesome to see some Lane publishing in an Italian city. I think since I'm visiting most of them during lunch break, they are pretty empty, so very nice to stroll around and touch all the yarns and see the exhibits. If you are in Milan and looking for some haberdashery, you should really learn the term merceria, which means haberdashery. And that's how I got distracted mid-phrase, because the windowsill in Milan are awesome. Frab's is a store I've only ever heard of. I didn't even know it has a physical store, and it has many and a curated selection of magazines that are not published in Italy, and they hold them all in this little tiny space. I saw so many good ones. I was in love. I found a cool magazine store that had Casa Brutus, that's a magazine from Japan, and it had Flow, which is a magazine from the UK for paper lovers, and I just had to stop, so yeah. But as I was saying, you should learn the term merceria, which is haberdashery, so a place where you're going to find not only wools and threads, but also buttons and other kind of notions, as well as you should learn the phrase quanto costa, to ask how much a thing is. So you can look for merceria on Google Maps and find lots of local little shops, as well as go in and ask quanto costa, so you'll know the price of everything you're interested in. Sorry, that was my cat trying to steal the scene, but The next shop I visited was Zucchero Filato. I love the name, it literally means cotton candy in Italian, and I think the vibes inside were pretty spot on with the name, since everything was showcased in these pastel colors, and there was some, I think like a theme going on inside the shop. It was like a children party. As for the yarn, they had a bookcase filled with it on one of the sides of the room, and as it often happens with Italian yarn store, the yarn was not like you couldn't touch it or take it in your hand without asking one of the clerks, and I think that's a bit of a shame, but it's quite common in Italy, unfortunately. I think the shop was super funky, and like in this case they had some skeins of yarn inside some drawers, and it was just fun. This is a super vintage way of showcasing button. It was incredibly used in Italy to have this cartella with the number, and when you wanted a button you had to ask for the specific number and the row. But by far the most awesome thing in this shop was this ice cream cart that had skeins of yarn inside. I absolutely loved it. It's so silly. Zucchero Filato was kind of small, kind of cute, extremely silent and dim lighted. But I loved the ice cream stand that had skeins of yarn inside. There wasn't a lot of yarn inside, and unfortunately to see the yarn, like to touch the yarn, you had to ask for each specific skein. So I did not spend a lot of my time there, but I think there was a nice selection of fabrics and ribbons and tapes, so if you're into that, check it out. And there were some nice colored yarns, lots of glitters and things that shimmers, so it's alright. My last shop for the time I had was Merceria Pinotti, but as soon as I stepped inside, I quickly realized it was just fabrics and no yarn. So just if you're looking for fabrics, you should consider going there. This last stop was unfortunately mostly fabrics, and since it was a merceria, it had some sewing notions and buttons and stuff like that, but as I said, merceria can be a little bit of everything, so this one did not have any yarns. So be mindful when you look for mercerias on your trip to Italy and to Milan. I think that was it for me today. As I said, it was a super quick yarn crawl during my free time just before setting up my booth for Abilmente, which is a 4-day event dedicated to creative crafts here in Milan and other cities. It's my first time attending the Milan edition, and it's held twice in the year, so if you're in Milan on holiday, just check out the website and see if you are lucky enough to be here in the same dates as this event. If you wanna know more about Abilmente, you can see my full vlog video where I showcase my stand and some of the other at the event. And if you were in the area and visited Lanar and Zucchero Filato, I think you should visit Nepà, which is a gorgeous vegan bakery and pastry where I absolutely asked for some stickers to attach in my junk journal. I do a lot of journaling, so if you like this kind of video, you can find that too on my channel, as well as my exclusive video I made for my Patreons, where I junk journal my visit to this yarn store, as well as my experience at Abilmente Milano with the Nepà stickers. And so yeah, you can find my video there. You can also find my mail club and lots of other goodies. I hope you liked this video. I thoroughly enjoy visiting yarn stores and eating some vegan pastries, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye!